Submitted for your approval. Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension. Self.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Hello, hello, hello. You're listening to a podcast not only of sound, but also of mind. It's Time to Rewind is a podcast that takes a journey into a wondrous land of time loops whose boundaries are that of imagination. Each episode, my guest and I explore these time loops one loop at a time. This stop is Trapped in the Twilight Zone, and this is the third stop at 1985's Season 1, Episode 23's first segment, Shadow Play. Here with me once again is my guest Austin Pryor from Malkovich Malkovich Minute Minute. How are you doing today?
Hey, Bubbawheat, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. I'm excited to talk about this 1985 version of Shadow Play. I noticed a lot more times this time. Or a lot more. I noticed a lot more stuff watching it again this time.
Oh, great! Yeah. No, there's a lot to this one, and I nearly dismissed it when first viewing it.
You know, this is the 1985 version, which at times is like almost identical word for word from the 60 version, but at other times it wildly diverges from it. And I think that's interesting, and especially like in the beginning here is, you know, very similar. Like I think one of the biggest differences, and I actually love this difference that, you know, you see him like pinching his hand at the beginning while he's waiting for the sentencing.
Yeah, he's pinching himself. This version also makes it clearer that he's lip syncing along with the other characters, which he does do in the original, but it makes it a bit clearer here. But I just think, like, the reason I alluded to earlier that I was ready to dismiss the 80s version, because I was just like, as soon as it comes on, I've just seen the 60s one, and then the same scene is played out in like much more conventional, cheap TV kind of an approach. They don't do the thing with the lights coming up. They don't do any effect of, you know, they put the camera on him first and then pull out. Mm-hmm. So you do get the effect of it focusing very much on him, but you don't get the effect that the world is popping into existence, which is exactly what you need. And that's an, you know, when I saw the effect in the 61 version of the lights coming up so that you can now see you're in a courtroom set, because you were just in a black void with one spotlight on the one table before that. That effect was so cool, and I just thought it was a cool effect, a great way to start a story. But then you realize that it's using language of dreams and showing that your world kind of starts with yourself and expands out as you come into your dream. And of course it's the answer to that is at the end of towards the end of the episode, when the lamp disappears and the people disappear and whatever, or the people fade out, and the people pop out of the existence in a very, you know, I thought that effect felt very 70s. They did also do it in the 60s version. None of the people popped out of existence, just the two pieces of furniture did, like the clock and one other piece. Yeah, and when I watched it first, I missed the clock, and then Alice missed something else, and when she was talking about it, and I just found it really interesting when I doubled back. I was like, how did I miss the clock? It's because I was watching something else, and Alice noticed that the people kind of glitched because they were standing still, and then a piece of set was removed, and then they start recording again, and they've moved ever so slightly, and so like I thought that effect was not that well realized in the 60s version, but it gave the conceptual ideas there that he's dying and the world that he's dreaming just kind of pops out of existence. So then in this version, they make that change straight out of the gate. They're just like, we're not doing any of that fancy production stuff. We're just going to use the camera. And then straight away, the next thing is that he
he starts ranting and raving and is much clearer and about this. Don't you understand? You're in a dream that I'm having. So if I die, you'll die. And it's like the premise is just all explained up front without the kind of sense of mystery. And I thought like this, I was just like, lads, take a hike. This is not working for me, And then as the episode wore on, there were more and more little changes all along, and they started to build to something. And I really was brought around. From a writing perspective, I was brought around on the 80s one. From the kind of production and acting and the look of it and stuff, I just, I couldn't get on board with it when you've got something as kind of classic and timeless as the look and feel of the 61 version. But
I think what they do a lot better in this one is all the side characters discuss their own existence a lot more.
Yeah, and there's more examples of how, they don't reuse the example of the glass on the watch but they kind of, the 80s writers took that and ran with it and said like, when were you married? And she can't remember. And there's all these gaps in their memories. And but of course, if they were real life characters, if I told you right now that you don't exist, I'm just dreaming this podcast, you would not entertain that notion in any serious way. You might entertain it for the sake of the podcast and explore the kind of the philosophy of it. And it would just, it would be a diversion, but you would not doubt your existence at all. But of course, these characters are basically, they question their existence because the dreamer is deciding that they question their existence. So it's easy for him to kind of say these kind of people also realize that they're not, they have the potential to realize they're not real. And that's because that's the dream he's having. He's having a dream where people in the dream start to realize that they're in a dream.
So let me ask you, since we're discussing this, do you think that within this world of the Twilight Zone, do you think that these people were created by the dream and they have their own existence and they exist as separate entities within the dream? Or do you think that they're still just basically aspects of Adam Grant's personality while he's having a dream?
Yeah, I very much think the latter. It's fun to think of the former, that he's like, if Adam Grant was some kind of god brain who could, create these things, and they would kind of, the only thing I'll say to support that theory is that there is sometimes when you have a dream that it seems to take on a mind of its own, it seems to have a momentum of its own, even if you're aware of it. Like I have had experiences of like self-hypnosis and under hypnosis, just because a friend of mine studied hypnosis, so I was just kind of doing it as an interesting exercise, And it is amazing when you get into that trance state, which is it's not a supernatural thing. And I know there's this whole thing about hypnosis where people want to debunk it, and it's like, well, are you debunking being calm and relaxed? Because that's all it is, So it depends on what you're debunking about it. Like obviously wild claims are made about hypnosis, but there's nothing to debunk if you're not making any wild claims. It's just when you're under, you're quite aware and you don't feel anything kind of crazy. You're not on a different plane of reality or anything like that. But I have experienced that when I come up out of it, I'm amazed at how down I was, how deep under the influence I was. I'm like, oh wow, the world does feel different when you wake back up out of it. Anyway, I recommend it just as an experience to anyone if you're able to do it, because it's just really interesting. But what quite effortlessly, even if you're aware of the dream, the part of you that's aware is doing the all the boring awareness kind of, calm, rational thought stuff. And then the other part of you, the irrational part, is just like producing these images for you, and it's very and it's happening effortlessly, and it's happening without your conscious control. These dream characters have a bit of momentum behind them, and they have a certain amount of agency just derived from the fact that your brain will just kind of quite effortlessly produce more stuff. But then I do think fundamentally what's happening is that this is all in his imagination, it's in his mind, and these characters are, every one of them is inevitably some aspect of Adam Grant or some observations he's made about other people. But even when we have a mental model of other people, it's still us. You know, you can still never truly escape your own perception and your own mind. And
I do think that the 85 version does a better job at connecting these characters back around to the waking version of Adam Grant. Even though there really is just like the two very specific examples where he talks about Mrs. Ritchie, the
district attorney's wife.
Yes.
Yeah.
That she is his sister, and that's the one role that never changes. It's always the DA's wife, even though the DA changes sometimes. But that character is always his sister, and it's always because she hates him. And then the father in this, the priest, is his actual father. And I like that change. I did notice especially that I think it's really interesting that looking at it from an outside perspective and deep diving into it, I almost feel like these connections are part of the explanation why he keeps having this recurring dream and why he can't escape from it, because he is projecting his problems onto these other people. It's like his sister is always there because she hates him. His father is there, he's haunting him. Like, why does my father keep haunting him? Yeah. And I did do just like a little bit of research in, my 5 minutes of Google, as I like to call it, into the analysis and interpretation of dreams. And for dreams of death, that is like one of the top 10 most common dreams, is dreaming that you're dying in some way. And I think dreaming that you're being executed definitely is included in that. And it represents the need to make a significant change in your life. And I think that's and him projecting this dream onto other people, I think that if you buy into dream analysis, that shows that he's not really willing that he's not really willing to make a change in his own life. He thinks that it's these outside forces that are doing this to him. Yeah.
No, I mean, I wouldn't entirely dismiss the practice of dream analysis and stuff, but this thing of like dream dictionaries where, I saw a red balloon. Well, I'll look it up and see what that symbolizes. Like, come off it. Like interrogate your own mind, ask what it means to you. I guess that's very Jungian. Jung talks about the collective unconscious, and like there is a certain amount of validity to that. We have a shared culture to one degree or another, and so there are kind of images and things that would have some sort of shared meaning, but it's got to be so individual, it's so personal, that I just think the idea of kind of just being told a dream and being able to interpret that without knowing the person and without, I just think is nonsense. But then, you'll have a dream sometimes where, it's like, wow, that was pretty on the nose. I can tell what that means, and then other times you're like, well, that was just garbled nonsense, most of the time. And, in this particular case, in this particular story, Adam Grant is he says that, you know, he must be guilty about something, but he's not sure what. And I think that's a really good addition in the 85 version, because he says it kind of almost offhandedly, and like, of course, knowing what you feel guilty about. Oh no, he says kind of offhandedly first, and then later he says, I've been racking my brain trying to think about it. So he does, in fairness, he does kind of deal with the importance of that. But because, like, that's got to be the key, certainly from a narrative point of view, that's got to be the key of him escaping this loop, which he doesn't, which I guess it would not be very Twilight Zone if he did. But he, so unraveling what happened in that family, that means he fears his dad like this and sees him as a judge, and there's some unfinished business there, and why his sister hates him. And I think that stuff is really good that they added that for this remake. But again, it doesn't. I don't mean in a critical way, but it doesn't go anywhere. You know, these are left as hanging threads, and I think that is, you know, it's part of the Twilight Zone formula, is that you don't want to wrap everything, you know, up too neatly. And but yeah, it does kind of make me wonder if there's more to be dug into there.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I haven't done too much research into it, just because, you know, I think, like we said earlier, like the 85 and the 2000s version of the Twilight Zone are kind of like the redheaded stepchilds of the Twilight Zone. But I'm pretty sure that the 85 version, it was an hour-long program, but they had multiple segments. So each segment,
yeah, it was like a Treehouse of Horror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they typically just had like two, but I think there might have been ones where they had like shorter stories, and they had maybe three of them, but I'm not sure about that.
I was looking it up on Wikipedia. There's a handful of them where it's three. There's some where it's one, where it's an extended, you know, extended version. So it's the one episode. I guess that's. I think I do want to see a 42-minute version of this story, or longer, you know, and because I think there is more to delve into, and I think and
there was one other bit of I almost think it was like foreshadowing, because whenever we're first introduced to Miss Ritchie, she starts going off about Adam, going off about his guilt to the defense lawyer. And the lawyer she says, you know, that almost sounds like it's personal. And this is before we find out that she's his sister and that she hates him.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, really good writing, really good additions to this story. They're adding these wrinkles, they're adding a bit of depth to it, and they're doing something that's kind of now conspicuous by its absence, which is some kind of drive behind the recurring dream in the first place. Like I think in the 60s version, it's like, well, recurring dreams exist and people do dream about being on death row, so let's do one of those, you know. Whereas like what the type of dream experience that this character is having in either version is really extreme, and it's kind of all roughly within the bounds of possibility of what kind of dream you could have. It's too neat, obviously. It's a TV show. Okay, we'll allow that. But something this extreme, something this kind of pathological, does need like an impetus. It needs an origin, you know. And they hint at that in this version, in the 80s version, which I like. You know, he says, I'm guilty about something, but I'm not sure what, you know. And so it does give you this kind of breadcrumb trail of like the sister, the father, and I'm guilty about something and I don't know what, you know.
Mm-hmm. I also like that there are at least a couple, you know, other than the direct copies of the previous version, that there are a couple of additional references, like Miss Ritchie mentions that she's making a roast. And
Yeah. which doesn't become the same. They don't do the same idea of the roast changing or the thing.
Mhm.
It's
But
just a little reference, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but I do appreciate that's one like additional reference to something in the original that they didn't do as a direct copy.
Yeah,
And,
it's a little nod for the people who remember the original.
and it's like the harmonica playing is Amazing Grace this time, which again it feels very cliche, but at the same time it's supposed to feel cliche because it's.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's changed from a cowboy song of the old range, and it's a love song, the Red River Valley. The cowboy love song is one of the kind of various names of it, but now Amazing Grace it's obviously a hymn, and it's also a song about redemption, and so I think that's got to be some kind of that's got to be a choice. You know what I mean? If they weren't making a choice, they would have just gone with Red River Valley because that was just the default. So the fact that it's Amazing Grace I think is hinting towards a redemption for our protagonist that doesn't come on screen, but he needs a redemption. Yeah.
I also think that Amazing Grace, just in general, in the pop culture, is typically tied. I want to say that it's tied very closely to like prison movies and with like executions. I want to say it's often tied to like funerals. And
I think
like
of it as funerals, definitely. Yeah, funerals, definitely. So yeah, it is. So it brings a funereal feel, and you're looking at death row and everything. Yeah, and I do. There's a bit of I do like the theme as well of because TV and movies influence our dreams, and that's written in as well. That like I got you from a movie, and that everything you were tried and sentenced and to be executed all in the same day, and like that feels like a movie, and it feels like a dream.
And I also noticed that there's some discrepancies because whenever the defense lawyer comes over to the DA's home, she mentions that it's been 2 days since sentencing, but then but then Adam Grant says that it all took place in the same day.
Yeah, ever since the hearing, she's saying I've been waking up in the mornings. Yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah, so I mean I guess that's all allowed by the fact that it's a dream, and time is so fluid in a dream, and the fact that they do later address it is it kind of, you can tell that it's intentional, that it's just like intentionally inconsistent because that's dreams for you.
Yeah, I also like the moment in that scene where she starts where she's offered a drink and she starts describing her drink, and then the DA like they finish the drink order together.
Yeah, but very then they're dry both, on the rocks.
And then they're both surprised by that fact.
Yeah, and then the DA just kind of shakes it off. So is that like the hint? That's a hint that they've done all this before and they're in a loop. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure if that's like some sort of crossover or if it's some sort of deja vu or exactly what they were trying to convey.
Because I wondered about that. But I think whichever way it is, the point is he has information in his head unaccountably, because for a second I thought they were going to go on like, because I was kind of aware of the dynamics, the gender dynamics of it. They established the wife as quite conservative, and then this younger woman appears at the door and walks in and starts having a drink with your husband while you're out of the room, and I would think that was they don't address it, but it was part of the subtext of that scene for me. Is that like, who does this woman think she is? Showing up. There are rules about this kind of thing. And And then I thought that the line where he's like very dry on the rocks is that the idea was showing that they've had drinks together in the past and maybe there's a past between them. But I don't think that's what it is. I think it's that because they're in a dream, he has access to knowledge that he can't account for how he has access to it. So yeah, it's interesting. But I did think it was offering kind of subtext about a previous relationship between those two, or maybe even an affair or something.
Yeah, and I also like the way that the Adam Grant shows the DA that he has knowledge that he wouldn't otherwise know.
Yes.
Since he is basically the outside observer during their scenes away from him, whenever he knows what the suggested music playlist
Absolutely,
was.
Yeah. By the way, what were the names? Like, was Frankie Valli one of them? I recognized one only of those names. I was like, these just crooners that were big in the...
Johnny Mathis was the first
one. Oh, Johnny Mathis. Yeah. That was the only one I recognized. Yeah. And then the rest were all like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the same with me. I considered like looking them up, but then I was like, we got a lot to cover with this, and it's the 1985 version. If I was focused on that scene, then I would definitely look those up. But looking at the episode as a whole, in the bigger picture, I'm like, I'm not going to do that for this.
I'll let that one go. Yeah, because I think, the meaning is pretty clear. It's crooners that get wifey in the mood is the idea. That's the shorthand they're going for. Which also has a chilling other meaning, because when Adam reveals to the DA that he knows about that conversation, it kind of implies that he's observed intimate moments as well,
like the voyeurism aspect, which I didn't really think about, since I was focused more on the fact that everybody is basically trapped in this recurring dream, which I did read somewhere that this version implies that the dreams are recurring concurrent to each other, that there are that there is no waking life in this version. And I meant to pay attention more to see if I could catch that, but I didn't get that impression myself. Did you get that at all?
Well, it raised the question for me. I got to me that's one aspect where both versions are the same. I wouldn't have thought there was any difference on this particular question, because it does in both versions give you this. It begs the question: why did he go straight back into the dream? Why didn't we cut to his waking life? I imagine like cutting to his waking self, and he's going like, and he's just purely exhausted, and he falls back asleep, and he gets the same dream again. That, and I kind of think that'd be even more effective. That because he wakes up with a jolt, because when you die or something sudden happens to you in a dream, you wake up with a jolt. Wakes up with a jolt, I would avoid the out and out cliche of bolt upright in the bed into with the camera already in the position where your head comes into, like, no, can't see that again. But if it was in a 1961 TV show, I wouldn't worry too much. But that you wake with a jolt, and then just like the exhaustion because he can't sleep peacefully because he keeps having this awful nightmare, and then just like maybe a couple of like dry tears, a couple of dry crying of like, shoulders heaving, and then just so exhausted he drifts back into another nightmare, and you cut to and I think that would give the crushing inevitability of it. I think it would strengthen the ending of either version, where it's just like, oh God, he's back in again, and it would also kind of serve to have an image of, we now have an image of him asleep in his bed. So I don't know why neither version did that, but I don't understand why somebody would look at the two different versions and say one of them implies that he never wakes up and the other one doesn't. Like if one of them implies that, the other one does, because like.
Well, in the 60 version, he does specifically mention that he keeps having the same dream night after night, so implying that that it is a recurring dream that he's only having at night, and it does refer to his waking life, and maybe it's just that this version doesn't explicitly mention his waking life.
I suppose, yeah. Maybe that's where it comes from. But I do think it would be, So I was saying it would be good to have a shot of him waking. So the counter argument for that is that I think that the kind of the filmmaking language that's being employed here is that when the characters disappear, we fade to black. So it's basically like that our camera is staying in the dream universe. And in that dream universe, you're suddenly in a void and nothing happens and no time passes. And then in that same universe, it comes back into existence again with one face and then two people next to each other. And then the courtroom becomes lit up. So I think that's the kind of film language justification for why we don't show any passage of time between each iteration of the dream, and why we don't see the waking person going back to sleep. So I think that's it's as if we're waiting there in oblivion, and then from oblivion comes the universe is reborn. Because
the way you're describing that actually reminds me of the Langoliers. Are you familiar with that at all?
No. What's that?
It's a Stephen King story, and it was made into a TV. I don't remember if it was a TV movie or a TV miniseries back in the 90s, I believe it was. And I saw it back whenever it came on, so I only have like the vaguest memory of it. The biggest thing that I remember is the actor that played Balky in Perfect Strangers was a prominent. He was kind of the biggest draw in that. Yeah. And the concept of that is like these people fall asleep on a plane, and then whenever they wake up, they're like in this empty, like everybody is gone. And then you eventually find out that they have basically shifted in time to jumped into the minute in the past. So they jumped like 1 minute in the past, and then the entire universe, like all the people are still in the present, and then basically all the physical universe still exists, but then it's being destroyed by these things called the Langoliers. So basically the universe is being destroyed, but they still exist in out of time.
Okay, so sorry, this was a dream you had?
No,
no, I get you. No, that sounds. It's well. Do you know what it sounds like? It sounds like something you'd see in a 1990s Stephen King mini TV series. That's. Do you remember liking it? Was it good?
I remember thinking it was okay. I don't think it's super well regarded in terms of Stephen King adaptations. It's just a forgotten 90s TV miniseries.
Yeah, it's no Tommy Knockers.
But I like that definition, and that kind of lends credence to my thought that this is a dream world that basically comes into existence whenever Adam Grant falls asleep, and then it's populated by all these characters that actually exist. Yes. And then whenever he wakes up, then the universe crashes in on itself and is destroyed.
Yeah, and I think, that is, you can say what you can just declare that to be what happens when we dream. You know what I mean? It's a universe of a kind, a very incoherent and non-cohesive one that has that is very slippery and ill-defined. But it'll do if you're stuck for a universe. Another thing that happened between the DA's wife and the defense attorney was this thing of when the defense attorney starts saying to the DA, do you never think to question that this whole life you have, and something about the line, which again is just taken from the 60s version, where he says, this beautiful wife, and it just feels very patronizing coming from a kind of much better looking woman. I don't know, there's something, maybe that's just to do with my personal tastes, but it's just like, yeah, and there had just been a little bit of tension between her and the wife, and it just seems like this, a patronizing move to say, and your wife is really beautiful, like I'm currying favor with her, and just like, and she doesn't, and she's in the room, the wife is in the room, and she doesn't look at him, she doesn't look at her when she says it, and I just that just kind of made me cringe and made me, oh, don't say that, because I don't think the wife would find that particularly complimentary. If I was the wife, I'd be like, you fucking, yeah. But did you notice that on this quite poorly remastered? So I think what we're watching now on the from the DVD release of the 1980s one is that you've got it seems to have been shot on film and transferred to videotape like back in the 80s, and just they used those tapes to run the DVDs from, rather than going back to the sources and stuff, because there's been a bit of degradation, it looks like, certainly in the soundtrack. And I don't know if you noticed this ghosting, where during a quiet patch, when there's about to be a louder line of dialogue spoken, or it would happen with effects as well or anything, you hear a faint pre-echo of it, so you'll hear, I didn't
notice that.
So you'll hear like, the defendant will rise, the defendant will rise, the defendant will rise, so you hear this pre-echo of the repeated line, and it just it's and it happens throughout, but it's very subtle. But this is it's a phenomenon of magnetic tape, that because magnetic tape is kind of the recording head that goes on to magnetic tape is putting a magnetic signature onto the tape and basically rearranging the magnetic north and souths of lots of little ferrous particles. And so if you leave a tape long enough, it will kind of record onto itself, so the magnetic signature on one part of the tape will put a ghost impression onto another part, because it's real, it's tightly reeled together. Yeah, so that's why master tapes are made from much thicker plastic, so that the ferrite material on one side can't influence what's on the other side. Yeah, I mean, you can cut this out if you want. I got very technical there because I love this stuff. But it produces this very kind of strange and spooky effect. And we had a few cassettes in the 80s that had this effect on them, and I knew them so well because they were stories that we listened to on long car journeys and stuff. And despite my love of fidelity and quality remastering and all of that, it made me like the episode a bit more, because it gave it this extra quality of kind of a melancholy, ghostly strangeness. You can definitely hear it on the version that you were working from as well, because I double checked, and it just I do have a real fondness for that strange effect that I knew as a kid had something to do with the tape, but I didn't know how it worked or anything. Yeah. Yeah,
that's interesting. Something that's I'm sure I've noticed, but I've never given much extra thought to before now.
Not me. Loads of thought.
Yeah, but once again, I'd like to thank you for joining me today. And why don't you go ahead and remind everybody once again where they can find you online?
MalkovichMinute.net. Malkovich is Malkovich. Minute is minute.net is .net. See you there.
And as always, I'm Bubbawheat, and you can find me at flightstightsandmovienights.com. You can find me on Twitter at Bubbawheat. And you can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. And we have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group. You can join it and have discussions about episodes as they come out, as well as anything else relating to time loops. And so until next time, I will still be right here, trapped in the Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval. Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Light for your approval.
Another dimension.
Light for your
Shadow. Another dimension.
Light for your
Shadow. Another dimension. Self.
Light for your
Shadow. Another Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Adam Grant, a nondescript man found guilty of murder and sentenced to be hanged by the neck until dead. Like most other criminals caught in the wheels of justice, he's scared, right down to the marrow of his bones. But it isn't prison that scares him. The long, silent nights of waiting, the slow walk to the hanging room, or even death itself.